He's amazed that these elaborately constructed forms, so different from each other and dependent upon each other in so complex a manner, have all been produced by the laws acting around us. There is a grandeur in this view of life, with its several powers having been originally breathed by the Creator into a few forms or into one, and that whilst this planet has gone on cycling according to the fixed law of gravity, from so simple a beginning, endless forms most wonderful and most beautiful have been and are being evolved. Let me read this to you again. There is a grandeur in this view of life. They say evolution proves life has no meaning. Darwin didn't think so. There is a grandeur in this view of life. There's your meaning, folks. Darwin did not say his origin of species, his discovery of natural selection as the means whereby evolution occurred. He did not say that leads to atheism, and it did not lead him to atheism either. I have some other quotes I'll read to you about him. The grandeur in this view of life, there's a meaning right there. It's not meaningless. With its several powers having been originally breathed by the Creator. He's quoting Genesis here, folks. God breathed life into us. Were you aware that Darwin was ending his summation of the origin of species by quoting Genesis in the Bible? Has anyone ever told you that before? It's very interesting, isn't it? Having originally breathed by the Creator into a few forms or into one. That's Darwin. He says, what kind of God do I believe in? The answer is in those words. I believe in Darwin's God. Fascinating. Charles Darwin. In The Life of Charles Darwin by Francis Darwin, this is a reprint originally in 1902. This is republished in 1995. Chapter 3, on the subject of religion, Darwin and religion. He says, I have never been an atheist. This is on page 55. I've never been an atheist in the sense of denying the existence of a God. I think that generally, and more as I grow older, but not always, that an agnostic would be a more correct description of my state of mind. But he wavered back and forth. It didn't directly lead him as an arrow, boink, right to the bullseye of atheism. Not at all. He says on page 56, I feel in some degree unwilling to express myself publicly on religious subjects, as I do not feel that I have thought deeply enough to justify any publicity. He said, I have never systematically thought much on religion. Now there's a refreshing bit of honesty. At least he doesn't overstep his bounds like some of our atheists do today. He considers that the theory of evolution is quite compatible with belief in a God. But that you must remember that different persons have different definitions of what they mean by God. Are you getting this? Are you getting this? Page 57. He considers that the theory of evolution is quite compatible with the belief in God. Okay. Why should I take Dennett and Dawkins and Fatuma's conclusions when I've got a much greater, glorious, weighty, important authority, Darwin himself? The state of mind which grand scenes formerly excited me and which was intimately connected with the belief in God did not necessarily differ from that which is often called the sense of sublimity. He equated this sense of sublimity, that his origin of species, and this idea of natural selection and the evolution, the changing, the morphing of all of life's forms, plant, animal, bug, etc., as sublime. That's not meaningless, folks. That's not meaningless. He says, another source of conviction in the existence of God, connected with the reason and not with the feelings, impresses me as having much more weight. He says this follows from the extreme difficulty, or the rather impossibility, of conceiving this immense and wonderful universe, including man with his capacity of looking far backwards and far into futurity as the result of blind chance or necessity. When thus reflecting, I feel compelled to look to a first cause, having an intelligent mind in some degree analogous to that of man, and I desire to be called a theist. It's on page 61 in The Life of Charles Darwin by his son, Francis Darwin. That's Charles Darwin talking. Then he says on page 64, nevertheless, someone had written to him about the universe, and he's summing up his ideas. He says, nevertheless, you have expressed my inward conviction, though far more vividly and clearly than I could have done, that the universe is not the result of chance. Page 64, The Life of Charles Darwin. Are you folks getting the gist of this? The footnote says, the Duke of Argyll has recorded a few words on this subject, having spoken to my father in the last year of his life. In the course of that conversation, I said to Mr. Darwin, with reference to some of his own remarkable works on the fertilization of orchids and upon the earthworms, and various other observations he made of the wonderful contrivances for certain purposes in nature. I said it was impossible to look at these without seeing that they were the effect and the expression of mind. You want to know what Charles Darwin's response was? Listen to this. I shall never forget Mr. Darwin's answer. He looked at me very hard and said, well, that often comes over me with overwhelming force. But at other times, and he shook his head vaguely, adding, it seems to go away. But it came on him with overwhelming force. Darwin's ultimate attitude was his preference for the unaggressive attitude of an agnostic. There's a lesson there for our atheists of today, isn't there? Darwin didn't want to offend sensibilities. He was a true gentleman. He was not in the business of destroying belief. He was in the business of enjoying the grandeur of this life. You atheists may want to pay attention. It could add meaning to your life if you took Charles Darwin's approach. It was not evolution that led Charles Darwin to atheism. It was the death of his young daughter. There's a huge difference in that. Maybe evolution gives Richard Dawkins and Daniel C. Dennett the fulfillment of being an atheist, but it didn't Charles Darwin, and it certainly doesn't me.